be right back. Destroy is an independent podcast produced by Be Right Back Studios. Every episode is supported by our listeners on Patreon, including Tim O'Donnell and Roy Burns III. More information is available at patreon.com/destroypunkpodcast.
People always have the opportunity to disrupt and create new narratives.
The main reason I pick up a guitar to write a song, because something makes me angry.
Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right.
People should really try to strive for a freer society.
How do we resist in small ways and in big ways?
That's why we're here to disrupt it with new ways of saying.
You have to focus on the opportunities for positive change.
It's always going to be slightly underground. You might not see it, but it's there.
On August 5th, 1976, Eric Clapton walked onto a stage in the northern English town of Birmingham and called for an all-white Britain. He praised Enoch Powell and told immigrants to go home. For many people in the room, it was the moment the rising cultural tensions became visible, not just in music, but across the country too.
When I read about Eric Clapton's Birmingham concert, where he urged support for Enoch Powell, I nearly puked.
Often, moments like these rarely appear out of nowhere. They are the result of pressure building beneath the surface, across politics, across culture, across the everyday lives of people simply trying to understand the world around them. Eventually, that pressure finds a language, sometimes through music, sometimes through protest, sometimes both. In the mid-70s, that language was punk, a movement that did not simply reflect the atmosphere, it forced it into the open.
At the time, punk felt very modern. It distilled, it epitomized a moment. It felt like the very epicenter of nowness, like a coup d'etat, like the most important thing happening at that time.
This is the world I grew up in, a world where culture and politics collided in the open, where resistance was not distant, it was in the air we breathed, and from that atmosphere, new voices emerged. Voices of protest. My name is Richard Smith. Welcome to Destroy.
They are punk rockers.
Raw, outrageous and crude.
The new craze, they tell me.
More into chaos than anything else.
People really don't understand what kids want.
Worthless, nasty.
They're a hero.
You have to destroy in order to create.
I was born in the mid-60s and came of age in an England that was tearing itself apart. My youth was a strange mix of hope and upheaval, power cuts, transport strikes, mass unemployment, and numerous political crises.
The small group of striking miners and their supporters who lobbied outside of the TUC gave some executive members a rough ride.
The miners, united, will never be defeated. The miners, united, will never be defeated. The miners, united, will never be...
I did not understand the civics, but I understood the vibrations. Something in the country felt close to rupture. It was not new. Britain had been wrestling with questions of race, identity and belonging since the end of empire. In 1968, Conservative MP Enoch Powell poured fuel on the fire with his rivers of blood speech, framing immigrants as an existential threat to the nation.
This country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
These ideas metastasized, they fed public paranoia and laid the framework for the far-right movements like the National Front and the BNP. For them, it was an opportunity to find someone else to blame.
I think that he was, in fact, backed precisely because he appealed to the fear and the insecurity which has led to a deterioration in the relations between the races. I think this is demagogy and not leadership.
For many of us, life felt uncertain. There was a constant sense that the adults had lost control. Alongside all of this came the blast of punk. It hit like an electric shock, a snarling feral refusal to play along.
Over the last 12 months, punk rock has become almost a battle cry in British society. For many people, it's a bigger threat to our way of life than Russian communism or hyperinflation.
On television, it looked like chaos.
It's what?
Nothing, a rude word. Next question.
No. What was the rude word?
Shit.
It was thrilling, enticing.
Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty bastard. You dirty fucker. You dirty old man.
It aligned perfectly with everything simmering beneath my skin, teenage angst and uncertainty.
Right, when I saw the pistols, right, I suddenly realised that I was no own.
It gave shape to the anger many of us already felt.
The young kids of today, they're frustrated and bored. They're sick of being pushed around, told what to do.
And as the country was tearing itself apart, the far right recognized that energy too. They saw punk as something that could be exploited, something that could turn suspicion into ideology.
Our clear concern was an emergency battle to challenge nationalism and racism and the fascists in Britain at that time.
If you're enjoying the show, please support us on Patreon or follow us on Instagram at Destroy Punk Podcast. By all accounts, August 5th, 1976 was a bleak, miserable night. Inside a sold-out Birmingham concert hall, a crowd stood in disbelief. Eric Clapton walked to the front of the stage. He told immigrants to go home. He praised Enoch Powell and called for an all-white Britain.
It was absurd, especially after he'd just had such a big hit out of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff.
It was a shattering moment. A musician whose career was built on blues and reggae, suddenly parroting the language of exclusion.
But when he started talking about how Enoch was right, I felt embarrassed.
For many, it changed everything.
It was a betrayal in a way that is kind of primal, a way that only an adolescent, a late adolescent could feel it.
Because if racism could speak that openly from the stage, it could no longer go unanswered. What began as a solitary moment of disbelief became an alliance of hope.
Rock Against Racism was one of the most successful campaigns mounted. It was this amazing phenomena of bringing together music and politics to fight racism, and it involved hundreds of thousands of people. It did, without any doubt, have a huge impact.
For Red Saunders, Clapton's outburst wasn't just appalling, it was clarifying. This wasn't a politician delivering policy, it was culture granting permission.
When I read about Eric Clapton's Birmingham concert, where he urged support for Enoch Powell, I nearly puked.
Saunders understood that silence would read as consent, so he wrote an open letter. And then he got others to sign.
I wrote it one evening, and other people chipped in, and we just did it very passionate. You've got to fight the racist poison, otherwise you degenerate into the sewer with all the rats and the money men. You think we're being colonialised by black people? Come on, you've been taking too much of that Daily Express stuff.
Red Saunders and what would become Rock Against Racism refused to let the moment pass, despite the threats and firebombs. But he didn't call for theory, a manifesto, nor hierarchy. He called for an alliance, an insistence that inaction carried consequence.
We didn't have time for polite meetings and discussions and debates. We had to crash, bang, wallop very quickly.
From Vietnam to apartheid South Africa, his experiences documenting protest had shaped his belief in showing the machinery behind injustice.
Our group of people who came together under the RA umbrella, who had already been involved in cultural activities on the left and socialist groups in Britain at that time, gay liberation, women's liberation, the war in Ireland, anti-apartheid, the hatred of the corruption of the war in Vietnam, which is in our lives every day. It was very class-based. Our outlook was class, not nationalism.
A year after its launch, Rock Against Racism began publishing Temporary Hoarding, a fanzine that operated as both archive and field manual. It opened with a plain statement of intent.
What we want is music that breaks down people's fear of one another. We want rebel music. We want riot music. We want now music.
There was no effort to build consensus, no position papers or policy platforms. Instead, bands played, people gathered. The combination of reggae and punk on the same bill created a framework for presence. This was not a coalition by agreement, it was alignment by proximity.
It was just really about this amazing phenomena of bringing together music and politics to fight racism. Very, very simple equation. Black and white bands together on stage, basically unheard of at that time.
It became one of the most effective anti-racist campaigns the world had seen, not because of persuasion, but because Rock Against Racism functioned as a logistical intervention.
What was so amazing is that we did our own stuff, we improvised, we didn't talk and think, but there was not a lot of philosophy involved. It was like, we're just going to get out there and fucking do it. It did, without any doubt, for me, have a huge impact because it was one of the most successful campaigns mounted against racism, having a mass impact. It involved tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people.
Conversations on this show do not end with each episode. At shopdestroy.com, we curate an archive of books, records, prints, and related material connected to our guests and themes. More information is available at shopdestroy.com.
The army have said throughout the day that they hope to use minimum force, but 3 hours after the procession began, this has ended up, as dusk comes onto the bogside, as the worst ever confrontation between the army and the Catholic people of the Craigan and Bogside.
While Saunders was mobilizing Rock Against Racism's response, others were learning the costs of segregation firsthand. Across the Irish Sea, Jake Burns witnessed the same divisions, but from a different front line.
I was born and grew up in Belfast, which had a pretty terrible reputation in terms of violence.
From an early age, the streets of Belfast shaped his worldview.
Father, how many dead have you seen in the Bogside?
Appearing to be dead, there are the 3 in that Saracen car. There are 2 men lying at the end of this block of flats. There's another man at least very close to being dead. There are 2 others up there.
I was 11 years old when what was termed the Troubles began, and to me this was normal.
The so-called Northern Ireland conflict instilled a constant awareness of injustice and intolerance.
My dad was quite a political animal. He was a trade unionist, he was a shop steward. There was a lot of shouting that the television went off, and obviously some of that wears off on you. It gave me a heightened awareness, a heightened sense of justice.
Moving through the city often meant navigating flashpoints, multiple neighborhoods mapped by fear.
When I walked home from work, I would walk past 3 or 4 different peace lines if you lived in one of the flashpoint areas. It would impinge on your life every day.
The divisions between Protestant and Catholic, loyalist and nationalist were not abstract. They governed daily life.
You got used to things that really were not normal looking back.
But there was no release for people's frustration. Violence was ambient. Belonging was conditional.
My dad was always, if they would stop fighting Catholics against Protestants and start realising that you don't actually vote for anything. It's basically a class struggle. It's always been a fucking class struggle. It's never going to be anything else but a class struggle. A lot of nonsense made up just to make you feel paranoid.
Yet Burns refused to sing for one side.
We were famously both Catholic and Protestant, and it never entered our fucking mind.
He understood how identity was weaponized, how grievance recruited the young, how violence was sold as belonging.
I've seen it since I was 11, 12 years old, and sadly at 67, I see the same damn pattern again and again and again and again. When the going gets tough, the dumb look for a daddy, because that daddy will give them the scapegoat they want, and then make off like a fucking bandit.
And in rooms where Catholic and Protestant kids were not meant to stand together, they did.
It's not something that I would ever concern myself with.
Not because punk erased differences, because it exposed how difference was being used.
I developed a very strong sense of justice at an early age. That's the main reason I pick up a guitar to write a song, because something makes me angry. Whatever you write about what you know.
What Burns named from the inside, Rock Against Racism, made sure it could not hide.
I really wanted to get involved in Rock Against Racism. That was something I felt very, very strongly about. It was one of the most obvious things in the world to get involved in. It was a no-brainer.
Punks, Rastafarians, black and white marching together, mods, rude boys, even anti-racist skins. Not united by taste, united by opposition. Not slogans, testimony, not abstraction, lived experience.
Everybody knew why they were there. So to me, why wouldn't you want to get involved?
Different perspectives, same refusal, the same resilience.
What I loved was the excitement of it. This was just people on the street who were like, no, fuck that, you're my neighbour. We should get on together. Why the hell we can't? I don't understand.
This was May Day in Lisbon. An infectiously happy people celebrated the restoration of freedoms taken from them almost 50 years ago.
For Ana da Silva, who was born on the island of Madeira, silence was never a choice. It was policy.
Portugal was under this dictatorship. You couldn't say what you thought. Censorship was very heavy, and being gay was impossible, and anything political was non-existent.
From the 1930s until the mid-70s, Portugal lived under an authoritarian regime that reached into every aspect of daily life. Speech was monitored, dissent was criminalized, even intimacy was regulated.
The establishment included the government, and it included church as well. So it was all these moralistic attitudes about what people should and should not do. Even somebody kissing somebody else, it got to the point that if you touch the lips, the films would be cut. People lived with their hands tight.
Millions left the country, and eventually Ana da Silva did too.
I didn't like it, and I didn't want to be there. I wanted to look for something else.
But exile was not escape. It was instruction. It taught her how power maintains itself through obedience, through isolation, through making silence feel normal.
If you were squashed, you just become a robot. You just do what you're told, what you're supposed to do.
When the dictatorship fell, it wasn't just laws that changed, it was what people were suddenly allowed to see, say, and feel.
They started showing all sorts of things that had sex and politics. It was people wanting to change things for the better.
For Ana da Silva, the answer was artistic freedom. So she left Portugal and moved to England. And by the time she arrived in London, punk was already beginning to take shape. But what mattered most was what it allowed. Punk opened spaces where women could exist without permission, where expression didn't have to behave.
The punk thing was positively inspiring to men and women and young people. And I just feel that I embraced all that side of it, more justice and more open and everything.
And out of that moment, Ana da Silva, along with Gina Birch, formed a band, the Raincoats. For da Silva and Birch, refusal was not a reaction, it was a new way of being heard.
We weren't playing a style of music that had its rules, so we were just doing all our own thing. It was this London mood that I really embraced at the time. It just made me feel that it was something that I could do.
This is when the world catches fire, when ordinary people recognize the heat and refuse to step back.
People should really try to strive for a freer society, because if you're free, your inner self expresses itself. You come out with ideas, with better things, with different things. Sometimes you don't know exactly how much squashed you actually are, but you try something just for the sake of it, and then you make judgments and form opinions. And I think that's the thing, is to really look at yourself to see what's there and bring that out. Sometimes I see the word genius for this person, for that, but I live in the middle of imperfection.
These are not just stories from the past. They are instructions for the present. How exile teaches you where power breaks. How voice teaches you how it lies. And how organization teaches you how it spreads.
The thirst for power is so big, but it's basically power for money and money for power. I'm looking for something more caring. That's what you want. It's not left or right. It's something that is caring for the community, basically. I haven't gone soft. Not me.
This episode of Destroy was written and produced by Be Right Back Studios. Music was composed by Tokyo Iconic. My name is Richard Smith. Thank you for listening. My name is Richard Smith, and I'm your host. I'm a filmmaker and art director, and once upon a time I was part of the big 80s. I designed record covers for Depeche Mode, I danced with Bono, discussed art with Mick Jagger, and drank tea with Susie Sue. I also grew up during those turbulent times in England in the late 70s and was driven by the do-it-yourself ethos of punk. I obsessed over bands like Joy Division and New Order and went on to work for the album cover designer Peter Saville. I believe that year, that moment in 1976, when a bunch of foul-mouthed yobs cursed and swore on national television, changed the future of culture forever, and is what brought us to where we are today. So where do we go from here? Will emerging new technologies be the catalyst that tears down the walls of mediocrity, throwing culture and society into chaos and revolution again? We'll have to wait and see. Destroy is a Be Right Back Studios production. Learn more at BeRightBackStudios.com. And please tune in again for another episode of Destroy, the Influence of Punk podcast, wherever you listen or download. Be right back. The archival audio used in this episode of Destroy is taken from a variety of unknown sources. Every effort has been made to use these clips responsibly, concerning their original creators for the purpose of education, commentary, and tribute. All rights remain with the original rights holders.